The stars screamed as Elise' ship plummeted toward Virellia, a planet pulsing with forbidden light. Alarms blared, metal groaned, and his heart raced, not just from the crash but from her. Lyra, a warrior with shimmering skin and eyes like violet flames, stepped from the glowing forest, her vines coiling with dangerous allure. "You dare trespass, starfaller?" She purred, her voice a sultry challenge, her furs barely hiding her curves. One wrong move, and she'd consume his soul, or ignite a passion that could burn the stars themselves. The alarm screamed like a banshee through the cockpit, shattering Elise's focus. Red warning lights pulsed across the console, bathing his rugged face in an eerie glow. His fingers danced over the controls of the stellar Nomad, his research vessel, as it spiraled toward an uncharted planet. "Status!" he barked, voice steady despite the chaos. The ship's AI, a dry feminine voice named Lyra, responded with maddening calm. "Primary engines offline, hull integrity at 62%, atmospheric entry in 47 seconds. Destination, unknown planet designated Virellia by stellar cartography." Elise's jaw tightened. Virellia? No data, no maps, just a glowing orb of silver and violet in the viewport, growing larger by the second. "Great," he muttered, yanking the manual thrusters. "Let's not die today, Lyra." The stellar Nomad groaned as it hit Virelia's atmosphere, metal shrieking against the fiery resistance. Elise's eyes locked onto a shimmering break in the planet's surface, a clearing amidst a forest of towering, crystalline trees that pulsed with liquid light. "There," he growled, steering the dying ship toward it. The ground rushed up, a blur of silver moss and glowing vines. "Brace!" Lyra chimed. The impact was a symphony of destruction. Metal crumpled, earth tore open, and Elise's harness bit into his shoulders. When the dust settled, he was alive miraculously, the cockpit hissing steam around him. Elise unbuckled, heart pounding, and checked his scanner. The air was breathable, but Lyra's voice cut in. "Warning, unknown bioenergy signatures detected. Recommend sealed suit." He nodded, slipping into his environment suit, its sleek design hugging his athletic frame. With a pulse pistol at his hip and an emergency pack slung over his shoulder, he popped the airlock. The moment his boots touched Virelia's soil, the ground rippled with light, silver waves spreading outward like a heartbeat. The crystalline trees pulsed in response, their branches humming a low, melodic tone. "Okay," Elise breathed, awestruck. "This place is alive." A flicker of movement snapped him out of his reverie. Someone darted between the trees, swift and graceful. Elise's hand hovered near his pistol, but he kept his voice calm. "Hello, I'm not here to hurt anyone. My ship crashed and I'm just trying to survive." The forest stilled, the hum fading to an expectant silence. Then she emerged, and Elise's breath caught in his throat. Her name, he'd later learn, was Lyra, a warrior of Virelia's Orali's tribe. She was breathtaking tall, with a lithe, powerful frame draped in furs that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her hair, white as starlight, cascaded over her shoulders, framing delicate, elf-like ears that twitched faintly. Her skin shimmered pale under the forest's glow, and her eyes burned with an inner violet fire that seemed to pierce his soul. The vines around her moved, alive, curling like extensions of her will. The trees shifted from silver to a wary crimson, mirroring her stance. "You trespass on sacred ground, starfaller," she said, her voice a melodic blend of menace and curiosity. The vines at her feet coiled tighter, ready to strike. Elise raised his hands, offering a disarming smile. "Starfaller, I like that. Name's Elise, though, just a guy who didn't plan on crashing his ship today." Her eyes narrowed, the forest's crimson deepening. "Your kind always comes with honeyed words and hidden blades. You seek to consume our light to steal what makes us whole." Elise blinked, caught off guard. "Consume your light? Lady, I'm just trying to not become space dust. No consuming here, I swear." He gestured to his pack. "I've got rations, terrible ones, mind you. Want to see?" Her gaze flickered to the pack, curiosity warring with suspicion. The vines relaxed slightly, and the forest hue softened to a cautious purple. "Show me," she commanded, stepping closer, her furs brushing against the glowing moss. Elise moved slowly, pulling out a sealed ration bar and holding it out. "See, just food, no light stealing involved." Lyra's fingers, long and elegant, plucked the bar from his hand. She studied it, her eyes scanning every detail, then sniffed it with a faint grimace. "This is sustenance?" she asked, her tone almost pitying. Elise chuckled, the sound easing the tension. "Barely. I'd trade it for a real meal any day. You got anything better around here?" The forest pulsed with a sudden burst of golden light, and Lyra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You jest, even in the shadow of death," she said, her voice softening. "You are not like the hunters in our tales." Elise seized the moment, leaning slightly closer. "Hunters? Sounds like you've had some bad visitors. I'm just a researcher, Lyra. I study stars, not whatever you think I'm here to steal. Her eyes widened slightly at her name, though she hadn't shared it yet. The vines in her hair stirred, and the forest's glow shifted to a warm amber. How do you know my name, Starfaller? She demanded, but there was a spark of intrigue in her voice. Illy grinned, tapping his scanner. This thing picks up more than just air quality. It caught your energy signature, pretty unique, by the way, like a supernova in a bottle. Lyra's ears twitched, and the forest hummed, its light now a playful pink. You speak in riddles, Illy, she said, testing his name on her tongue. But words alone will not prove your intent. She stepped back, the vines parting to reveal a path deeper into the forest. Follow me to the crystal spires. My sisters will judge you, fail, and the forest will claim you. Illy swallowed, but his grin didn't falter. Lead the way, then. I'm not big on being plant food. As they moved through the forest, the crystalline trees sang, their notes shifting with Lyra's mood. Illy couldn't help but notice the way her furs swayed with her fluid grace, or how the forest seemed to bend to her will. So, he said, keeping pace, this place, Virellia, it's incredible. The trees, the light, it's like the whole planet's alive. Lyra glanced at him, her violet eyes assessing. Virellia is life itself. We are its guardians, bound to its energy. You, an outsider, cannot understand. Maybe not, Illy admitted, his tone earnest. But I'd like to try, if you'll let me. The forest pulsed brighter, and Lyra's gaze lingered on him, a flicker of something softer in her eyes. Perhaps, she said quietly. But first, you must survive the spires. The path opened to a clearing dominated by towering crystal formations, their surfaces refracting the forest's light into rainbows. Figures emerged, other Aurali's warriors, their white hair and furs gleaming, their eyes glowing with the same fire as Lyra's. They carried staffs that hummed with energy, and the forest's song grew tense. Starfaller, one called, her voice sharp. Why do you invade our sacred land? He raised his hands, his heart racing but his voice steady. No invasion, just a guy who crashed and needs a hand. I'm Illy, and I'm hoping we can talk this out. The warriors murmured, their staffs glowing brighter. Lyra stepped forward, her vines curling protectively. I sense no malice in him, Elder Nara, she said. He is different. Nara's eyes narrowed, but the forest's light softened as if echoing Lyra's words. Then he will face the trial of light, Nara declared. Prove your heart, Starfaller, or become one with Virelia's roots. Illy glanced at Lyra, her expression unreadable but her energy signature pulsing with something like hope. Trial of light, huh? He said, flashing a grin. Sounds like my kind of challenge. As the warriors formed a circle around the largest spire, Illy felt the weight of their gazes and Lyra's. The forest sang louder, its light swirling around him, and he knew this was no ordinary test. Whatever happened next, he was about to discover just how deep Virelia's secrets, and Lyra's heart ran. The crystal spires loomed over Illy, their prismatic surfaces catching Virelia's bioluminescent glow and fracturing it into a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across his suit. The air thrummed with energy, a living pulse that seemed to sync with his heartbeat, or was it Lyra's? She stood just outside the circle of Aurali's warriors, her violet eyes locked on him, her white hair shimmering like a halo under the spire's light. The forest's song had shifted, no longer a gentle hum but a rising crescendo, charged with anticipation. Illy's pulse quickened, not just from the impending trial of light, but from the way Lyra's gaze seemed to burn through him, equal parts warning and something dangerously softer. Starfaller, Elder Nara's voice cut through the tension, sharp as the crystal staff she gripped. The trial of light will test your essence. Virelia's heart does not suffer deceivers. Step into the spire's embrace and let it judge you. The warriors' staffs glowed brighter, their energy weaving a lattice of light around the central spire. Illy glanced at Lyra, catching the faintest tightening of her lips, a flicker of concern in her fiery eyes. He winked, hoping to ease her worry and his own. No pressure, right? He said, his voice lighter than he felt. The forest pulsed, a ripple of amused gold threading through its colors. Lyra's vines stirred, curling tighter around her arms, and the forest's light shifted to a sultry magenta. Do not mock the trial, Illy, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that made his skin tingle. It sees what you hide, even from yourself. Her words hung in the air, intimate and ominous, as if she'd reached into his chest and brushed against his soul. Illy swallowed, his grin faltering for a moment. Noted, he said, stepping toward the spire. Let's see what Virellia thinks of me. The moment his boot touched the spire's base, the world shifted. A surge of energy coursed through him, warm and electric like a lover's touch tracing his spine. The spire's surface pulsed, its light wrapping around him, and the forest's song became a symphony in his veins. He gasped, his vision blurring as colors exploded behind his eyes. Silver, violet, gold, each hue carrying a feeling. Curiosity, fear, desire. The warrior's murmurs faded, replaced by a single, clear presence in his mind. Lyra. Her energy signature was unmistakable, a radiant thread weaving through the spire's power, pulling him deeper. Outside the spire, Lyra's breath caught as she watched Ellie's form glow within the crystal's embrace. The forest responded, its magenta deepening to a rich, pulsing crimson, mirroring the heat rising in her chest. She clenched her fists, her vines trembling. No outsider had ever withstood the spire's touch, let alone connected with it. Yet Ellie stood tall, his broad shoulders taut, his dark eyes wide with wonder rather than pain. The sight stirred something forbidden in her, a longing she'd been trained to suppress. Her sister's eyes were on her, their staffs humming with suspicion, but she couldn't tear her gaze from him. His energy, raw and unrefined, pulsed in sync with Virelia's and with hers. Inside the spire, Ellie felt like he was drowning in light, but it wasn't suffocating, it was intoxicating. The energy flowed through him, teasing out memories, emotions, desires he'd buried under years of star-hopping solitude. He saw flashes of his life, the cold steel of his ship, the endless void of space, the ache for something more. Then, unbidden, came an image of Lyra, her fierce eyes, her lithe form moving through the forest, the way her furs clung to her curves. His breath hitched, and the spire's light flared, projecting his thoughts outward, in a cascade of shimmering patterns. The warriors gasped, their staffs dimming as the forest erupted in a frenzy of color, crimson, gold, and a deep, pulsing pink that made Lyra's cheeks flush beneath her pale skin. "Impossible," Nara whispered, her eyes darting between Ellie and Lyra. The spire was revealing him, but it was also revealing her. Lyra's vines coiled tighter, her body rigid as the forest betrayed her own racing heart. Ellie's desire, his fascination with her, was laid bare for all to see, and worse, it echoed her own hidden feelings. Ellie staggered as the spire released him, the energy receding like a tide. He caught himself against the crystal, his chest heaving, his suit slick with sweat. "That was intense," he managed, his voice rough. He looked at Lyra, and the air between them crackled, charged with something neither could name. The forest's pink glow lingered, and he swore he saw a spark of something, embarrassment maybe, in her eyes before she masked it. "You survived," Nara said, her tone grudging but laced with awe. "The spire has spoken, your essence is untainted." The warriors lowered their staffs, but their eyes remained wary. Lyra stepped forward, her movements fluid yet tense, her furs brushing against the moss as it pulsed beneath her. "Come," she said to Ellie, her voice softer now, though it carried an edge. "The trial is done, but the night is not. You will rest in the spire hollow." Ellie followed, his legs unsteady but his grin returning. "So I passed? Gotta say, that light show was something else. Felt like it was talking to me." Lyra's ears twitched, and she shot him a sidelong glance, her lips parting slightly. "It was," she said, her voice a low murmur that sent a shiver down his spine. "And it said more than you know." The path to the spire hollow wound deeper into the forest, the crystalline trees parting to reveal a cavern lit by glowing vines that draped like chandeliers. Their light bathed Lyra's skin in a soft, ethereal glow, highlighting the curve of her neck, the strength in her shoulders. Ellie tried not to stare, but the forest energy seemed to amplify every glance, every brush of their arms as they walked. "This place," he said, breaking the charged silence, "it's like it's alive with you. The way it moves when you do, it's beautiful." Lyra stopped, turning to face him, her eyes blazing. "You speak too freely, Starfaller," she said, but her voice was husky, betraying the heat in her gaze. "Virelia's light reveals truth, and yours is unsettling." She stepped closer, her vines curling toward him, brushing his arm with a featherlight touch that made his pulse race. "What do you seek here, Ellie, truly?" He held her gaze, his own voice dropping to a whisper. "I didn't come looking for anything but survival, but now, I think I'm finding something worth staying for." The forest pulsed, its light shifting to a deep, sensual violet, and Lyra's breath hitched. For a moment, they stood inches apart, the air thick with unspoken desire, the vines around her trembling as if they could feel it too. A rustle in the trees broke the spell, and Lyra stepped back, her expression hardening. "The hollow is near," she said, turning away, but not before Ellie caught the flush on her cheeks. "Rest, Starfaller. Tomorrow, my sisters will demand more than words." As she led him into the cavern, its walls shimmering with patterns that seemed to dance to their shared rhythm, Ellie felt the weight of her words, and the pull of something deeper, something Virellia itself seemed to urge them toward. The spire hollow was a sanctuary of light and warmth, its vines weaving a canopy that pulsed softly. Lyra gestured to a moss-covered alcove, its surface glowing faintly. "Sleep here," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. The forest will guard you or judge you. Illy raised an eyebrow, settling onto the moss, which molded to his form like a lover's embrace. Guard or judge, huh? Sounds like I'm in for a fun night. Lyra's lips twitched, but she turned to leave, her furs swaying with each step. Hey, Lyra, he called, his voice soft but firm. She paused, glancing over her shoulder, her eyes catching the light like twin stars. Thanks for not letting the forest eat me. Yet. A smile flickered across her face, brief but genuine, and the vines above pulsed pink again. Sleep, Illy, she said, her voice a caress in the dark. You'll need your strength. As she vanished into the forest, the cavern's light dimmed, but the warmth of her presence lingered, wrapping around Illy like a promise of what was to come. The spire hollow's gentle glow pulsed like a heartbeat, lulling Illy into a restless sleep on the mossy alcove. The vines above swayed, their light shifting between soft silver and a teasing violet, as if Virellia itself were whispering secrets about the warrior who'd left him here. Lyra. Her name lingered in his mind, her fiery eyes and the electric brush of her vines haunting his dreams. But the forest's song, once soothing, grew discordant, a sharp note slicing through the haze of sleep. Illy's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding as the cavern's walls flared with an urgent crimson. He sat up, his suit sensors buzzing with a warning, unidentified energy surge detected. Proximity alert. The moss beneath him vibrated and the vines overhead coiled tightly, their light pulsing in frantic patterns. Ilara, he whispered, tapping his wrist calm. What's happening? The AI's voice crackled faintly, distorted by Virelia's interference. Bioenergy spike, source unknown, recommend immediate caution. Before he could respond, a shadow moved at the cavern's entrance, swift and silent, followed by another. Not Lyra, her energy was a warm beacon, these were colder, sharper. Illy rolled to his feet, pulse pistol in hand, its hum a faint comfort against the forest's rising wail. The shadows resolved into two Orali's warriors, their white hair braided with glowing vines, their furs darker than Lyra's, edged with jagged crystal shards. Their eyes burned with a predatory amber, and their staffs crackled with energy that made the air taste of ozone. Starfaller, the taller one, hissed, her voice like a blade. You survived the spire, but you trespass still. The forest demands a price. Illy raised his hands, keeping the pistol low but ready. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. Lyra brought me here, said I'd be safe. The second warrior, her face younger but no less fierce, stepped closer, her staff's light casting eerie shadows across her angular features. Lyra is young, swayed by your honeyed words, we are not. The forest's crimson deepened, the vines around them writhing like serpents. Illy's scanner beeped, its readings spiking off the charts. These warriors weren't just angry, they were channeling something, a force that made the cavern tremble. Before he could respond, a familiar presence cut through the tension. Lyra burst into the hollow, her furs swirling, her vines snapping like whips. Zara Vexa, stand down, she commanded, her voice a mix of fury and desperation. The forest's light flickered, caught between crimson and her signature violet. The warriors hesitated, their staffs dimming slightly, but Zara's amber eyes narrowed. You defend him, sister. His kind brings only ruin. The elders warned us of starfallers who steal our light. Lyra stepped between Illy and the warriors, her body taut, her vines curling protectively around her. He is different, she said, her voice steady but laced with a fire that made Illy's chest tighten. The spire saw his truth. Would you defy Virelia's judgment? The forest pulsed, its light shifting to a conflicted gold as if echoing her challenge. Vex's lips curled into a sneer. The spire may spare him, but the veil does not. He must face the second trial now. Illy's stomach dropped. Another trial? I thought I passed the VIP test already. Lyra shot him a glance, her eyes blazing with a mix of exasperation and something softer, fear maybe for him. The veil is not like the spire, she said, her voice low, meant for him alone. It tests your will, your heart's deepest desire. Fail and it will consume you. Her hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him, the forest flaring pink for a heartbeat. Zara raised her staff, and the cavern's vines parted, revealing a tunnel that descended into darkness, walls pulsing with a sickly green glow. The veil awaits, she said, her tone final. Prove your worth, starfaller, or become one with the roots. Illy glanced at Lyra, her expression unreadable but her energy signature a storm of worry and defiance. He nodded, holstering his pistol. Lead the way, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. But I'm warning you, I'm not great at pop quizzes. The tunnel to the veil was a descent into another world. The air grew thick, heavy with a metallic tang, and the walls pulsed with green veins that seemed to watch him. Lyra walked beside him, her presence a lifeline, while Zara and Vexa flanked them, their staffs casting harsh shadows. "What is this veil?" Illy asked, keeping his tone light despite the dread coiling in his gut. Lyra's eyes flickered to his, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is Virelia's heart, where our deepest truths are laid bare. It will show you what you fear and what you crave." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in a haze of green mist. At its center stood the veil, a swirling vortex of light and shadow, its edges crackling with energy that made Illy's skin prickle. The forest's song was gone, replaced by a low, ominous drone that vibrated in his bones. Zara gestured to the vortex. "Enter, Starfaller. Face the veil, or we will cast you into it." Illy glanced at Lyra, her vines trembling, her eyes locked on him with an intensity that made his heart race. "Any tips?" he asked, half joking. "Don't fight it," she said, her voice urgent, her hand grazing his, sending a spark through his skin. "Let it see you." The touch lingered, her fingers warm against his, and the forest's light flared, a brief burst of violet that made Zara scowl. Illy nodded, stepping toward the veil, its pull like gravity, inescapable and hungry. The moment he crossed its threshold, the world dissolved. The chamber vanished, replaced by a void where light and shadow danced in chaotic patterns. Illy's senses burned, overwhelmed by sensations: heat, cold, the scent of Lyra's furs, the echo of her voice. Then images flooded his mind, his ship alone in the void, his parents' faces faded by time, and Lyra, her eyes blazing, her body pressed close, her vines wrapping around him in a way that was anything but innocent. He gasped, his body responding to the vision, heat pooling in his core as the veil amplified his desire. But the vision shifted, darkening. Shadows coalesced into figures, hunters, their eyes glinting with greed, their blades dripping with blood. They lunged at Lyra, her screams tearing through him. Fear gripped him, not for himself but for her, a primal need to protect her surging through his veins. The veil pulsed, feeding on his emotions, and Illy realized it wasn't just testing him, it was testing them. He felt Lyra's energy, even here, a thread of violet light weaving through the chaos, anchoring him. Outside the veil, Lyra's breath hitched as the chamber's walls erupted in a frenzy of color: crimson, gold, violet, pink. The warriors gasped, their staffs faltering as the forest reacted to Illy's trial. Lyra's vines curled inward, her body trembling with the effort to stay still. She could feel him, his fear, his desire, his defiance, all laid bare by the veil. "He fights for you," Vexa said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "An outsider, bound to our heart." Lyra's eyes burned, her voice fierce. "He is more than you know." Inside the veil, Illy roared, his will clashing with the shadows. He pushed back, focusing on Lyra's light, her strength, her fire. The hunters dissolved, replaced by a vision of her standing beside him, their energies intertwined, the forest singing in harmony. The veil shuddered, its drone rising to a scream, and then silence. Illy stumbled out, collapsing to his knees, his chest heaving. The chamber's light stabilized, a warm gold washing over him. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her hands on his shoulders, her touch grounding him. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice thick with relief. Illy looked up, meeting her gaze, and the air between them crackled, charged with something raw and undeniable. "Told you I'm not great at failing," he said, his grin weak but genuine. The forest pulsed, its light a vibrant pink, and Zara's staff lowered, her expression stunned. "No outsider has ever tamed the veil," she said. "What are you, Starfaller?" Illy stood, Lyra's hands still on him, her warmth seeping through his suit. "Just a guy who's starting to like this planet," he said, his eyes never leaving Lyra's. The forest sang, its notes soaring, and he knew the real trial was just beginning, not with the veil, but with the warrior whose heart was as wild and untamed as Virellia itself. The golden glow of the chamber bathed Illy and Lyra in a warm embrace, the forest's song softening to a gentle hum that seemed to celebrate their survival. Illy stood, still feeling the electric aftershocks of the veil's touch, his body tingling where Lyra's hands lingered on his shoulders. Her violet eyes held his, a storm of emotions swirling within them, relief, defiance, and something deeper that made his heart skip. The Orali's warriors, Zara and Vexa, stood frozen, their staffs dimmed, their faces a mix of shock and grudging respect. The veil had spoken, and Illy, an outsider, had answered its call in a way no one expected. But the air was thick with tension, the forest's light flickering as if sensing the drama yet to unfold. Lyra's fingers tightened briefly on his shoulders before she stepped back, her vines curling inward as if to shield her racing heart. "You've proven yourself to the veil," she said, her voice steady but laced with a tremor that betrayed her. "But the elders will not be so easily swayed." Her gaze flicked to Zara, whose amber eyes narrowed, her staff humming with renewed energy. "The Starfaller's survival changes nothing," Zara said, her tone sharp. He is still an outsider, and Virelia's secrets are not his to know. Illy wiped sweat from his brow, flashing a grin despite the tension. Secrets, huh? I'm more of an open book guy myself. Maybe we could swap stories over a nice, non-lethal dinner. The forest pulsed with a sudden burst of pink, and Vexa snorted, her lips twitching as if fighting a smile. Lyra's ears twitched, her expression caught between exasperation and amusement. You just even now? She asked, her voice low, but the forest's light betrayed her, swirling with warm hues that made Illy's grin widen. Enough, Zara snapped, her staff flaring. The elders await at the crest of stars. They will decide his fate. She turned, her furs sweeping the glowing moss, and Vexa followed, casting a lingering glance at Illy that was equal parts curiosity and warning. Lyra gestured for him to follow, her movements fluid but tense. Stay close, she murmured, her voice a soft command that sent a shiver down his spine, and try not to provoke them further. The path to the crest of stars wound through a forest that seemed to watch their every step, its crystalline trees pulsing with a rhythm that matched Lyra's stride. Illy kept pace, his eyes drawn to the way her white hair caught the light, her furs swaying with each step. The forest's song was a constant companion, but now it carried a note of anticipation, as if Virellia itself was holding its breath. So, Illy said, breaking the silence, this crest of stars sounds like a place for big decisions. Any chance I can charm my way out of this one? Lyra's lips quirked, but her eyes remained fixed ahead. Charm is not a currency the elders value, she said, though her tone held a hint of playfulness. They guard Virelia's heart fiercely. Your survival in the Vale has complicated things. She glanced at him, her violet eyes catching the light, and the forest flared with a teasing magenta. Illy raised an eyebrow. Complicated, huh? Is that code for Lyra starting to like me? The forest's light pulsed pink, and Lyra's cheeks flushed, her vines snapping like tiny whips. You are insufferable, she muttered, but the warmth in her voice belied her words. Before Illy could push further, the path opened to a breathtaking sight. The crest of stars, a towering plateau ringed by spires that shimmered like captured galaxies. At its center stood a circle of elders, their furs adorned with glowing crystals, their eyes burning with a collective intensity that made Illy's bravado falter. The forest's song rose to a dramatic crescendo, and he felt Lyra's hand brush his, a fleeting touch that steadied him. Elder Nara stepped forward, her staff radiating a cold blue light. Starfaller, she said, her voice echoing across the plateau, you have defied the Vale, but Virelia's judgment is not complete. The crest demands the trial of harmony, a test of your bond with our world. Illy's heart sank. Another trial? He glanced at Lyra, whose expression was unreadable, but her vines trembled, betraying her unease. Harmony, he said, keeping his tone light. Sounds like a dance. Do I get to pick my partner? The elder's eyes narrowed, but the forest pulsed with a ripple of amused gold, and Lyra's lips twitched again. This is no jest, Nara said, her voice cutting through the air. The trial of harmony requires you to join with Virelia's essence and one of its guardians. Her gaze shifted to Lyra, and a murmur rippled through the elders, their staffs flaring. Illy's stomach did a flip. Wait, join with Lyra? He asked, his voice catching. The forest's light exploded in a chaotic swirl of pink and violet, and Lyra's cheeks burned, her vines curling tightly around her arms. It is not what you think, Lyra said quickly, her voice sharp but unsteady, her eyes avoiding his. The trial binds your energy to Virelia's through a guardian. It is intimate, but not in the way your mind leaps to. Illy grinned, unable to resist. Oh, so no candlelit dinner first? I'm hurt. The forest pulsed pink again, and a few younger warriors stifled laughs, their staffs dimming. Nara's glare could have cut crystal. Silence, Starfaller, disrespect will not aid you. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low, meant for him alone. The trial is dangerous, Illy. Our energies must align perfectly, or the forest will reject us both. Her hand brushed his again, and the contact sent a jolt through him, the forest flaring with a sensual violet that made his pulse race. Okay, he said, his voice softer now, meeting her gaze. I trust you, let's do this. Her eyes widened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her warrior's mask, and the forest's light softened to a warm gold. The elders formed a circle around a central spire, its surface pulsing with intricate patterns. Lyra led Illy to its base, her movements graceful but tense, her furs brushing against him as they stood close. Place your hand here, she said, guiding his palm to the spire's surface. Her fingers lingered over his, warm and steady, and the forest's song shifted, a low, thrumming rhythm that vibrated through them both. Illy's breath caught as their energies connected, a rush of heat and light that felt like falling and flying at once. The spire flared, and the world dissolved into a storm of sensation. Illy felt Lyra's essence, fierce, wild, radiant, merging with his own, their energies tangling like lovers in a dance. The forest sang, its notes soaring. But then a discordant wail cut through, and the spire's light turned jagged, crimson. Lyra gasped, her hand tightening on his, and Lee felt a surge of panic, not his, but hers. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her voice strained. The forest's light pulsed erratically, and the elder's murmurs grew alarmed. Ellie's mind raced, the spire's energy pulling at him, exposing his fears, his desires. He saw Lyra, her body pressed against his, her eyes burning with need. But then the vision twisted, hunters, their blades gleaming, tearing her from him. "No," he growled, pushing back, focusing on her light, her strength. The spire shuddered, and Lyra's voice broke through, urgent. "Illy, don't fight it, feel it." He did, letting her energy guide him, their bond deepening until the forest's song stabilized, a triumphant gold washing over them. They stumbled back, gasping, their hands still clasped. The elders stared, their staffs dimmed, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. The forest pulsed with a radiant harmony, its light reflecting the bond between Ellie and Lyra. "You succeeded," Nara said, her voice faltering. "The Starfaller is bound to Virellia, and to you, Lyra." The words hung heavy, and Lyra's cheeks flushed, her vines curling shyly. Illy grinned, squeezing her hand. "Guess we make a good team, huh?" The forest flared pink, and a few warriors laughed, breaking the tension. But Zara stepped forward, her amber eyes cold. "This changes nothing," she said. "The Starfaller's presence risks us all. The elders will convene tonight. Prepare yourself, Lyra, for what comes next." She turned, her furs sweeping, and the forest's light dimmed, a shadow of foreboding settling over the plateau. Illy looked at Lyra, her expression torn between duty and something softer, and he knew their bond, whatever it was, had just made everything a lot more complicated. The crest of stars shimmered under Virelia's twin moons, their silver light casting long shadows across the plateau as the elders dispersed, their murmurs fading into the forest's restless hum. Illy still felt the echo of Lyra's energy in his veins, a warm, pulsing thread that lingered from their trial in the spire. Her hand was still in his, her fingers warm and trembling, and the forest's light pulsed a soft, suggestive pink that mirrored the heat in his chest. Zara's warning hung in the air, a dark cloud over their fleeting victory, but the way Lyra's violet eyes met his, fierce, vulnerable, and charged with something unspoken, made the elder's judgment feel like a distant concern. Lyra released his hand, her vines curling inward as if to guard her racing heart. "Come," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, carrying a weight that sent a shiver down Ellie's spine. "We must return to the Spire Hollow. The elders will deliberate, but the forest, it grows restless." Her furs swayed as she turned, the movement drawing his eyes to the curve of her hips, the way the glowing moss seemed to caress her every step. The forest's song shifted, a sultry melody weaving through the crystalline trees, and Ellie followed, his pulse quickening with every step. The path back to the hollow was a dance of light and shadow, the trees pulsing in time with their footsteps. Ellie couldn't help but notice how Lyra's presence seemed to command the forest, its colors deepening to a rich magenta whenever she glanced at him. "So," he said, keeping his tone light to mask the heat building in his core, "that trial of harmony felt like we were more than just partners out there. Did you feel it too?" Lyra's ears twitched, and the forest flared, a vibrant pink that made her cheeks flush beneath her pale skin. "You speak too freely, Starfaller," she murmured, but her voice was husky, betraying the warmth in her gaze. They reached the Spire Hollow, its vine-draped walls glowing with a soft, intimate light that wrapped them in a cocoon of warmth. Lyra paused at the entrance, her vines stirring restlessly, as if they could sense the tension between them. "The forest feels you," she said, turning to face him, her eyes blazing with that inner fire. "Your energy, it calls to Virellia to me." She stepped closer, her furs brushing against his suit, and the air crackled with a charge that made his skin tingle. Illy swallowed, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And what does it say, Lyra? Because I'm hearing something pretty loud right now." Her lips parted, a soft gasp escaping as the forest's light pulsed a deep, sensual violet. "It says you are dangerous," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of caution and desire. "Dangerous to our ways to me." Her hand reached out, her fingers grazing his chest, and the contact sent a jolt through him, the forest flaring in response. Illy caught her wrist gently, his thumb brushing her skin, feeling the pulse of her energy beneath. "Maybe I'm the good kind of dangerous," he said, his grin soft but bold. "The kind that makes things interesting." Lyra's breath hitched, her vines curling toward him, brushing his arms with a featherlight touch that sent heat pooling in his core. The forest's song grew richer, a melody that seemed to urge them closer, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped into his space, her body inches from his, her eyes searching his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You do not understand what you stir," she said, her voice a low caress, but Virellia does. It binds us, Illy, in ways I cannot explain. He leaned closer, drawn by the heat in her gaze, the way her furs clung to her curves, revealing the strength and softness beneath. Then show me, he murmured, his lips hovering near hers, the air between them charged with anticipation. The forest pulsed, its light a vibrant dance of pink and violet, and Lyra's vines wrapped gently around his wrists, not restraining but guiding, pulling him closer. Her lips brushed his, tentative at first, then hungry, a spark igniting into a flame that consumed them both. The kiss was electric, a fusion of their energies that made the cavern's walls flare with patterns of gold and crimson. Illy's hands found her waist, the furs soft under his fingers, her body warm and yielding yet strong. Lyra's vines wove through his hair, their touch sending shivers down his spine, and she pressed herself closer, her curves molding against him. The forest sang, its melody a crescendo of desire, amplifying every touch, every breath. Her lips moved against his, fierce and needy, and Illy felt her energy surge through him, a heady mix of fire and light that left him breathless. They parted, gasping, their foreheads touching, the forest's light pulsing in time with their racing hearts. Lyra's eyes were wide, her cheeks flushed, her vines trembling with the intensity of their connection. This is forbidden, she whispered, but her voice was thick with longing, her hands still clutching his shoulders. Illy grinned, his fingers tracing the edge of her furs, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath. Forbidden's my favorite flavor, he said, his voice rough with desire. And I'm pretty sure Virelia's cheering us on. The forest flared pink, as if in agreement, and Lyra's lips twitched, a smile breaking through her warrior's mask. You are impossible, she said, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she guided him to the mossy alcove, its surface glowing with a soft, inviting light. They sank onto it, the moss molding to their bodies, and Lyra's vines wove a delicate canopy above, shielding them in a cocoon of light and warmth. Her fingers traced his jaw, her touch both tender and bold, and Illy felt his control slipping, the forest's energy amplifying every sensation. Their movements were a dance, slow and deliberate, each touch a discovery. Lyra's furs fell away, revealing the pale, shimmering skin beneath, her curves bathed in the cavern's glow. Illy's hands explored her, reverent yet hungry, and she responded in kind, her vines teasing his skin, sending sparks of pleasure through him. The forest's song wove around them, a symphony of desire that seemed to celebrate their union, its light pulsing in rhythm with their breaths. Every kiss, every caress was a melding of their energies, a bond that felt as ancient as Virellia itself. But the moment was shattered by a sharp, discordant note in the forest's song. The vines above recoiled, their light shifting to a frantic crimson, and Lyra tensed, her eyes snapping to the cavern's entrance. Someone comes, she whispered, her voice urgent, her vines curling protectively around them. Illy's heart pounded, not just from their intimacy but from the sudden shift in the air, a presence, cold and menacing, approaching fast. He grabbed his pulse pistol, his body still humming from Lyra's touch, and stood, shielding her as the forest's light flared with warning. Zara emerged from the tunnel, her amber eyes blazing, her staff crackling with energy. Behind her stood Vexa, her expression unreadable, and two other warriors, their furs bristling with crystal shards. Lyra, Zara said, her voice like ice, you defile our sacred bond with this outsider. The forest pulsed, its crimson deepening, and Lyra rose, her furs hastily adjusted, her vines snapping with defiance. He is bound to Virellia, she said, her voice fierce. The forest accepts him, why can't you? Zara's staff flared and the cavern trembled, the vines recoiling further. The elders have decided, she said. The Starfuller's presence threatens our harmony. He must face the final trial or be cast into the abyss. Illy's grip tightened on his pistol, his eyes meeting Lyra's, their bond still thrumming between them. Another trial? He said, his voice steady despite the tension. You guys really know how to make a guest feel welcome. Lyra's hand found his, her touch a silent promise, and the forest's light softened to a determined gold. Whatever came next, they would face it together, but the shadow of Zara's words loomed, a threat that could tear them apart before their bond could fully bloom. The spire hollow pulsed with a tense crimson glow, its vines recoiling as if bracing for a storm. Zara's words echoed in the charged air, her amber eyes boring into Lyra, who stood defiant, her hand still clasped in Illy's. The warmth of their recent intimacy lingered, a fragile thread of connection that felt like it could snap under the weight of Zara's ultimatum. The forest's song was a discordant wail, reflecting the conflict that crackled between the Orali's warriors and the outsider who dared to touch Virelia's heart. Illy's grip on his pulse pistol tightened, his body still humming from Lyra's touch, but his eyes were steady, meeting Zara's glare with a defiance that mirrored Lyra's own. "Cast into the abyss?" Illy said, his voice carrying a hint of his usual bravado, though his heart pounded. "Sounds like you're skipping the welcome party and going straight for the dramatic exit." The forest flickered with a brief pulse of gold, as if amused, but Zara's staff flared, its light casting harsh shadows across her angular face. "Your jests will not save you, Starfaller," she said, her voice cold as the void. "The abyss is Virelia's final judgment. No outsider has returned from it." Lyra's vines snapped like tiny whips, her eyes blazing with violet fire. "He is no ordinary outsider," she said, stepping forward, her furs brushing against Illy's arm, sending a jolt through him despite the tension. "The spire and the veil have accepted him. The forest sings with his energy. You cannot deny Virelia's will." Vexa shifted behind Zara, her expression torn, but the other warriors' staffs hummed with menace, their light a stark contrast to the warm violet that pulsed around Lyra and Illy. Zara's lips curled into a sneer. "The forest may sing, but the elders speak. You, Lyra, have let this starfaller cloud your judgment. Step aside, or you will share his fate." The words hit like a physical blow, and Lyra's hand tightened on Illy's, her vines curling protectively around his wrist. The forest's light shifted to a deep, conflicted magenta, and Illy felt her energy surge through him, a mix of fear and resolve that anchored him. "I stand with him," she said, her voice unwavering. "If he faces the abyss, so do I." The cavern trembled, the vines overhead writhing as the forest's song rose to a fevered pitch. Illy's heart raced, not just from the threat but from the weight of Lyra's choice. He squeezed her hand, his voice low, meant for her alone. "Sure about this? I'm not exactly the drag someone into an abyss type." Lyra's eyes met his, a spark of warmth breaking through her warrior's mask. "You are my type, Starfaller," she murmured, and the forest flared pink, making Vexa stifle a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Zara raised her staff, and the vines parted, revealing a jagged chasm at the cavern's edge, its depths swirling with a dark, pulsating light. "To the abyss, then," she said, her tone final. "Prove your bond or be consumed." Illy and Lyra moved as one, their hands still clasped, the forest's light pulsing in time with their steps. The other warriors formed a semicircle behind them, their staffs glowing with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. As they reached the chasm's edge, Illy peered into its depths, the swirling light pulling at him like a gravitational force. "Any last-minute tips?" he asked Lyra, his grin masking the dread coiling in his gut. "Don't let go," she said, her voice soft but fierce, her fingers tightening on his. "Whatever you see, whatever you feel, we face it together." The forest's song shifted, a haunting melody that seemed to echo her words, and Illy nodded, his heart swelling with something he wasn't ready to name. They stepped forward, and the abyss swallowed them, its light enveloping them in a rush of sensation that drowned out the world. The darkness was alive, a swirling maelstrom of shadow and light that tore at Illy's senses. He felt Lyra's hand in his, her energy a beacon in the chaos, but the abyss was relentless, peeling back layers of his mind. Visions flooded him, his ship crashing, his solitary years in the stars, the ache for connection he'd buried deep. Then came Lyra, her image vivid and searing, her lips on his, her vines teasing his skin, her body pressed against him in the hollow. But the vision twisted, and a new figure emerged, a woman, her face identical to Lyra's, but her eyes cold, her furs black as night, her vines sharp and cruel. "Illy," the shadow Lyra hissed, her voice a distorted echo, "you think you can claim her? You, an outsider, weak and fleeting?" The abyss pulsed, its light jagged, and Illy felt a stab of doubt, his grip on Lyra's hand faltering. The shadow Lyra lunged, her vines slicing through the air, and Illy instinctively raised his pistol, firing a pulse that dissipated into the darkness. Lyra's voice broke through, urgent and real. "Illy, it's not me, it's the abyss testing us." Her energy surged, warm and radiant, pulling him back from the edge. He focused on her, the real Lyra, her violet light cutting through the shadows. But then came the twist, a revelation that shook him to his core. The abyss didn't just test him, it revealed Virelia's secret. Images flashed. Lyra, younger, standing before a spire, her body infused with the forest's energy, her eyes glowing for the first time. But she wasn't alone. Another figure, identical to her, stood beside her, their energies intertwined. A twin, a shadow self, created by Virelia's ancient power to guard its heart. The shadow Lyra wasn't just a vision, she was real, a fragment of Lyra's essence, split by the forest to protect its secrets. "Lyra," Illy gasped, his voice hoarse as the visions faded, leaving them floating in the abyss's swirling light. "You have a twin? A dark version of you." Lyra's eyes widened, her vines trembling, and the forest's song faltered, a note of shock rippling through it. "How do you know of her?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Silra, she was banished, her light corrupted. the abyss must have summoned her essence. Her hand shook in his, but she didn't pull away, her energy anchoring him as the shadows closed in. The shadow Lyra materialized, her black furs gleaming, her vines lashing like blades. "You cannot have her, Starfaller," she snarled, her voice a twisted mirror of Lyra's. "Virellia is mine, and I will tear you apart to keep it." Ellie's pulse raced, but he felt Lyra's energy surge, her light clashing with Silra's darkness. The abyss trembled, its light fracturing, and Ellie realized the trial wasn't just about surviving, it was about saving Lyra from her own shadow. He pulled Lyra close, their bodies pressed together, their energies intertwining in a desperate bid to fight back. "We're stronger together," he said, his voice fierce, his lips brushing her ear. The forest's song roared, a triumphant crescendo, and their combined light flared, pushing back Silra's darkness. The shadow Lyra screamed, her form dissolving into the abyss, but not before her vines lashed out, grazing Ellie's arm, leaving a burning trail of pain. They stumbled out of the abyss, collapsing onto the chasm's edge, their breaths ragged. The forest's light stabilized, a warm gold washing over them, but the warriors' faces were pale, their staffs dimmed. Zara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You faced the abyss and defeated its shadow," she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "But Silra's return changes everything. The elders must know." Lyra clung to Ellie, her vines curling around him protectively, her eyes haunted. "She's alive," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My sister, she's out there." Ellie held her close, his arm throbbing but his resolve unshaken. "Then we'll find her," he said, his voice steady despite the shock of the revelation. Together, the forest pulsed, its light a vibrant mix of violet and gold, and he knew their bond had just been forged in a fire neither of them could have anticipated. But Silra's shadow loomed, a threat that could unravel everything they'd fought for. The forest's golden light bathed Ellie and Lyra as they knelt at the edge of the abyss, their breath still ragged from their encounter with Silra's shadow. The sting of the wound on Ellie's arm pulsed in time with his racing heart, but it was Lyra's trembling form, pressed against him, that held his focus. Her vines curled around him, protective yet fragile, their tips brushing the gash where Silra's dark vines had struck. Her violet eyes, usually so fierce, were clouded with a mix of fear and guilt, her whispered words, "She's alive, my sister," echoing in the charged air. The Orali's warriors stood frozen, their staffs dimmed, their faces a mix of awe and unease as Zara's declaration hung heavy. The elders must know of Silra's return. Ellie tightened his hold on Lyra, ignoring the pain in his arm. "We'll find her," he repeated, his voice low but firm, a promise that felt as binding as the energy thrumming between them. The forest's song softened, its melody a tentative harmony, but the crimson undertones lingered, a warning of the storm to come. Lyra pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his, her vines brushing his cheek with a tenderness that made his chest ache. "You don't understand, Ellie," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Silra was my shadow, my other half. If she's alive, she'll come for me and for you." Zara stepped closer, her amber eyes cold but uncertain, her staff casting harsh shadows across the glowing moss. "The elders will convene at dawn," she said, her tone clipped. "Until then, Lyra, you are responsible for the Starfaller. Keep him close and keep him silent." Her gaze flicked to Ellie, who flashed a grin despite the tension. "Silent? That's a tall order. I'm more of a charm my way out of trouble guy." The forest pulsed with a flicker of gold, and Vex's lips twitched, but Zara's glare could have shattered crystal. "Mockery will not aid you, Starfaller. The Elder's judgment will be final." Lyra rose, pulling Ellie to his feet, her touch steadying him as the forest's light shifted to a warm violet. "Come," she said, her voice soft but commanding, her furs swaying as she led him away from the chasm. The warriors parted, their eyes following them, a mix of suspicion and curiosity in their glowing gazes. Ellie kept pace, his arm throbbing but his focus on Lyra, the way her white hair caught the moonlight, her vines swaying like an extension of her emotions. "Oh," he said, keeping his tone light to ease the tension, "dawn's a few hours away. Any chance we can grab a snack before the elders decide if I'm breakfast?" Lyra's ears twitched and the forest flared pink, a brief burst of amusement that made her cheeks flush. "You just even now?" she asked, but her voice held a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Virelia's trials have not broken you, but your humor might." Ellie chuckled, brushing his uninjured hand against hers, feeling the spark of their connection. "Gotta keep things light, Lyra. Otherwise, I might start overthinking this whole evil twin-sister situation." The path led them to a secluded grove, its crystalline trees forming a natural canopy that glowed with a soft, intimate light. The air was thick with the scent of blooming vines, their petals pulsing with bioluminescent hues. Lyra stopped, turning to face him, her expression torn between duty and something softer, more vulnerable. Silra was not always evil, she said, her voice low, her vines curling inward as if shielding her heart. We were bound, created together by Virelia's light, but she craved power, sought to control the forest rather than serve it. The elders banished her, but I never stopped feeling her. Illy stepped closer, his hand hovering near her cheek, hesitant but drawn to her. "You're not her, Lyra," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're the one who saved me, who stood by me. That's what matters." The forest pulsed, its light a warm gold, and Lyra's eyes softened, her vines brushing his wrist, sending a shiver through him. "You make it sound simple, Starfaller," she murmured, but she leaned into his touch, her skin warm under his fingers. The moment was shattered by a rustle in the trees, and Illy's hand dropped to his pistol, his body tensing. Lyra's vines snapped upright, her eyes scanning the grove. But it was Vexa who emerged, her furs gleaming under the moonlight, her staff dimmed. "Relax, sister," she said, her tone lighter than before, though her eyes flicked to Illy with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "I'm not here to drag you to the elders yet." She tossed a small, glowing fruit to Illy, who caught it awkwardly, his wounded arm protesting. "Eat, you'll need strength for dawn." Illy examined the fruit, its surface shimmering like a tiny star. "Thanks, Vexa. Didn't peg you for the snack delivery type." Vexa smirked, her elf-like ears twitching. "Don't get used to it, Starfaller. Lyra's vouching for you, but I'm still deciding if you're worth the trouble." The forest pulsed pink, and Lyra's cheeks flushed again, her vines curling tightly. "Vexa," she said, her voice sharp, "your timing is inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Vexa's smirk widened, her eyes darting between them. "Seems I interrupted something more than a heart-to-heart. The forest's been glowing pink all night. Care to explain, sister?" Illy choked on a laugh, the fruit nearly slipping from his hand, and Lyra's vines snapped like tiny whips, her face burning. "The forest exaggerates," she said, her voice clipped, but the glow around them only deepened, betraying her. Illy grinned, taking a bite of the fruit, its sweet, warm flavor bursting on his tongue. "Tastes like starlight," he said, winking at Lyra. "Kinda like you." Vexa laughed outright, her staff flaring with a playful light. "You're bold, Starfaller, I almost like you." But her expression sobered as she glanced at Lyra. "The elders are divided. Silra's return has stirred old fears. Some say the Starfaller's presence woke her essence." Lyra's vines trembled, and Illy felt a pang of guilt, his humor fading. "Wait, you're saying I caused this?" he asked, his voice low. "I just crashed here, Vexa. I didn't sign up for evil twin drama." Lyra's hand found his, her touch grounding him. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice fierce. "Silra's corruption was her own. But your energy, it resonates with Virelia's, with mine. It may have called to her." The forest pulsed, a mix of violet and crimson, reflecting the weight of her words. Vexa nodded, her eyes softening. "Be ready at dawn, both of you. The elders will demand answers and another trial." She turned to leave, but paused, tossing Illy a teasing glance. "And try to keep the forest's glow less scandalous, will you?" The grove fell silent, the forest's light settling into a warm, expectant gold. Illy looked at Lyra, her face still flushed from Vex's teasing, and he couldn't help but grin. "Scandalous, huh? I think the forest likes us together." Lyra's lips twitched, a smile breaking through her tension, but her eyes were haunted. "The elders will not be so easily swayed," she said, her voice soft. "And Silra, if she's truly alive, she'll come for us." Illy stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek, feeling the pulse of her energy beneath. "Let her come," he said, his voice steady. "We face the abyss together, we'll face her too." The forest flared, its light a vibrant violet, and Lyra leaned into his touch, her vines curling around his wrist. But the air grew heavy, a distant hum rising in the trees, and Illy's scanner beeped, its reading spiking. Something was coming, something dark, and the forest's song turned sharp, a warning that their fight was far from over. The grove's golden light flickered as the distant hum grew louder, a menacing undertone weaving through Virelia's song. Illy's scanner beeped insistently, its readings spiking with chaotic energy signatures, and Lyra's vines tightened around his wrist, her violet eyes scanning the crystalline trees with a warrior's intensity. The air felt heavy, charged with the promise of conflict, and the forest's crimson undertones pulsed like a warning heartbeat. Illy's wound throbbed, a reminder of Silra's shadow, but Lyra's touch grounded him, her warmth a beacon in the gathering storm. "Whatever's coming," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We face it together, right?" Lyra's gaze softened, her lips curving into a faint, determined smile. "Together," she echoed, her voice a promise that sent a surge of warmth through him. The forest's light flared, a vibrant violet that seemed to celebrate their bond, but the hum grew sharper, and the trees trembled, their branches swaying as if bracing for impact. Illy tightened his grip on his pulse pistol, his other hand still clasped in Lyra's, their energies intertwining in a way that made the grove glow brighter. "Let's get to the elders," he said. "If Silra's out there, I'd rather not meet her in the dark." They moved swiftly, the forest parting before Lyra's will, its vines weaving a path back to the crest of stars. The twin moons cast a silver glow over the plateau, where the elders stood in a solemn circle, their furs gleaming with crystal shards, their staffs radiating a tense blue light. Zara and Vexa were there, their expressions grim, and the forest song was a chaotic symphony, reflecting the unease that gripped the Orales tribe. Elder Nara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she took in Ali and Lyra's joined hands, the forest's violet glow pulsing around them. "You return at a dire hour," she said, her voice heavy. "The forest speaks of a shadow unleashed, Silra's essence grows stronger." Lyra's vines snapped, her voice fierce. "She is my sister, but I will not let her harm Virellia, or him." Her gaze flicked to Ali, and the forest flared, a mix of gold and pink that made Vex's lips twitch despite the tension. Nara's staff flared, silencing the murmurs of the other elders. "The Starfaller's presence has stirred her," she said. "His bond with you, Lyra, has awakened what was banished. You must confront her, or Virellia will fall to her corruption." Before Lee could respond, the forest's song turned shrill, a piercing wail that made the ground tremble. The trees erupted in a frenzy of crimson, and a figure emerged from the shadows. Silra, her black furs stark against her pale skin, her eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent green. Her vines lashed like blades, slicing through the glowing moss, and the forest recoiled, its light dimming under her presence. "Lyra," she hissed, her voice a twisted echo of her sister's, "you betray our blood for this outsider. I will take Virelia's heart and his." Ili stepped forward, shielding Lyra, his pistol raised. "Not happening," he said, his voice steady but laced with defiance. "You want to fight, you get me too." The forest pulsed, a flicker of gold threading through its crimson, and Lyra's hand found his shoulder, her energy surging through him, fierce and protective. "Silra," she said, her voice breaking with pain, "you were my sister, but this ends now." The battle erupted in a blaze of light and shadow. Silra's vines struck like vipers, their tips sharp as daggers, but Lyra countered, her own vines weaving a shield that glowed with violet fire. Ili fired his pistol, its pulses scattering Silra's attacks, but her energy was relentless, a dark tide that threatened to overwhelm them. The elders raised their staffs, their light bolstering Lyra's, but Silra's power was rooted deep in Virellia, a corruption that twisted the forest's song into a discordant scream. Ili dove to avoid a lashing vine, rolling to his feet beside Lyra. "Any bright ideas?" he asked, his breath ragged but his grin intact. Lyra's eyes blazed, her vines curling around his arm, their energies merging in a rush that made the forest flare. "We harmonize," she said, her voice fierce. "Like the trial, our bond is stronger than our hate." Ili nodded, his heart pounding as he focused on her, their energies intertwining in a dance of light that pushed back Silra's darkness. The forest responded, its song rising to a triumphant crescendo, its light a radiant gold that burned away the crimson shadows. Silra screamed, her vines faltering as Lyra and Ili's combined energy surged, a beacon of harmony that Virellia itself seemed to amplify. The elders' staffs flared, their light joining the fray, and Silra staggered, her green eyes flickering with fear. "You cannot stop me," she snarled, but her voice wavered, and the forest's light overwhelmed her, dissolving her form into a cascade of fading sparks. Silence fell, the forest's song softening to a gentle hum, its light settling into a warm, golden glow. Lyra collapsed against Ali, her vines trembling, her breath ragged. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her, feeling the pulse of her energy against his. "She's gone," Lyra whispered, her voice thick with relief and sorrow. "My sister, she's finally free." Ili brushed a strand of white hair from her face, his touch gentle. "You did it," he said. "We did it." Nara approached, her staff dimmed, her eyes softened with a newfound respect. "The Starfaller has proven his worth," she said, her voice carrying across the plateau. "And you, Lyra, have shown Virelia's true heart. Your bond is its strength." The elders murmured in agreement, their staffs glowing with a warm light, and Vexa stepped forward, her smirk returning. "Told you he was trouble," she said, winking at Ili. "Good trouble, though." Ili grinned, his arms still around Lyra, the forest's light pulsing pink around them. "Guess I'm sticking around then," he said, his eyes meeting Lyra's. "If you'll have me." Her lips curved into a smile, her vines brushing his cheek, sending a shiver through him. "Virellia has claimed you, Starfaller," she said, her voice soft but sure. "And so have I." Days later, Ili stood beside his repaired stellar nomad, its hull gleaming under Virelia's moons. The Orales had shared their knowledge, their energy helping to mend his ship. But it was Lyra's presence that made him pause. She stood beside him, her furs catching the light, her eyes glowing with that familiar fire. "You could stay," she said, her voice a mix of hope and challenge. "Virellia has much to teach you." Illy took her hand, their energies intertwining, the forest singing in harmony. "Or you could come with me," he said, his grin bold. "The stars are pretty incredible, too." Lyra's laugh was like music, her vines curling around his wrist. "Impossible, man," she said, but she stepped closer, her lips brushing his in a kiss that set the forest ablaze with light. "Perhaps we'll explore both." As they stood together, the forest's song soared, a melody of love and possibility that echoed across Virellia. Illy's crash landing had been a twist of fate, but it had led him to Lyra, to a bond that transcended worlds. The stars called, but so did Virellia, and together they would answer both, their love a light that no shadow could dim. As Illy and Lyra's kiss lit up Virelia's skies, their love became a beacon across the stars, proving that even a crash landing can spark a cosmic romance. I loved crafting this tale of passion and courage. Illy and Lyra show us that love can conquer any galaxy. What do you think? Could you fall for an alien warrior like Lyra? Thank you for joining us on X-Aurel. Your likes, subs, comments, and shares fuel our stories, so hit that button and let's keep the adventure glowing.